So I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about the show, and then I'll introduce Eleanor. So Vic, you can start the screen share now. All right. Okay, I'm going to start. Okay, here we go. All right. This past year was a year like no other. As we grappled with the challenges, a year fraught with stress, uncertainty, isolation, loss, grief, fear, outrage, and so much more as we grappled with the challenges both in our daily lives and in the entire world around us. The complex of disruptions and anxieties thrown at us by the COVID-19 pandemic, political corruption and chaotic governance at the highest levels, a threatened presidential transition, the relentless tragedies and injustices spotlighting systemic racism and the huge swell of protests against them, the unprecedented devastation by fires and extreme weather, massive disinformation from multiple sources, and more. It was also a year of inventing ways to cope with this array of challenges, each in our own way. A year of insights and revelations, of finding new ways to connect, of using our strength to push back against personal difficulties and larger problems in the world. In short, of adapting and surviving, and perhaps even making the world a little bit better in some ways. For 2020 Vision, Seeing Ourselves Through Challenging Times, Cabrillo Gallery put out a call for entries to artists across the United States to submit artworks that responded to the events of the past 12 months, including the beginning of 2021, however they may have manifested as creative acts. We asked, how do you see yourself or the world around you through all of this? How did you face and cope with your challenges? The artworks included in this exhibition were selected by Juror Eleanor Harwood of Eleanor Harwood Gallery in San Francisco. They reflect a multitude of perspectives: losses, struggles, tales of survival, revelations and lessons learned, hopefulness, actions to materialize change, quiet meditations and reflections, acknowledgements of the simple pleasures of life, as well as the absurdity in life, such as it has been over the past year.
Just coming to the end here.
Thank you, Victoria. Now, I'm delighted to introduce Juror Eleanor Harwood. Eleanor graduated from the University of California, Santa Cruz, with a dual degree in film, video production and theory, and American Studies with an emphasis in visual culture. She has a background in film and video production, web design, and special effects. Eleanor found her passion in life as curator at the Adobe Books Backroom Gallery from 2002 to 2006. During that time, she also completed an MFA in painting at California College of the Arts. In 2006, she opened Eleanor Harwood Gallery, now located in San Francisco's premier gallery complex, the Minnesota Street Project. Her gallery specializes in work with complex craft and concept, and focuses on painting, drawing, sculpture, textiles, and photography by emerging to mid-career artists. Welcome, Eleanor.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to have a little conversation here. I'm going to start out with a question for Eleanor. Please tell us about your trajectory in your career prior to opening your gallery. I gave the bullet point version of your career highlights when introducing you, but we would love to hear about what you were thinking or experiencing on a more existential level when you transitioned from one path to the next, especially when leaping from one career path to a very different one.
All right, I will be happy to talk about it. I just wanted to say thank you to, I do see maybe a few of the artists that were in the virtual exhibition on our list of folks who are following along. And just as Victoria was scrolling along, I was kind of moved again by all of the imagery. It's really powerful to see just everyone's response and bringing so much personal joy and strife and struggle and just, I don't know, the kind of the intimacy of our work can sometimes be a little overwhelming. So I'm a little like choked up, to be honest. So thank you to everyone for sharing it. And thanks for the opportunity to jury it. It was lovely to work with you guys. And now I can talk about myself. I'm not crying over my past career, I promise. So let's see. The question was, how did I get into being in the gallery world? I suppose with a little more detail. As Beverly said, I went to UC Santa Cruz and I did a degree in film and video. And at the time in Santa Cruz, what I focused on was much more experimental in nature. So it really wasn't working in the feature film world. It was more kind of documentaries, experimental video art, things like that. And then I went on to work at BAVAC, which is the Bay Area Video Coalition here in San Francisco. And started out interning there first while I was working at a makeup counter in Macy's and working 7 days a week and being 21 in San Francisco and trying to make it work. And BAVAC was amazing. And I ended up running the video art preservation program there. And that was really fascinating, wonderful. And it was sort of the time in San Francisco where the first .com boom was happening. And I got headhunted out of BAVAC into a special effects company. And that seemed really exciting. And initially it was supposed to be a feature film company, but it really turned into just working 10, 12-hour days and just doing piecework, doing special effects, rendering projects crashing all the time. And it was really stressful and not very fulfilling. And it was, it wasn't a great experience. But as with most of us, and I guess the artwork in the show is kind of the point, is hopefully when we have bad experiences, we try and go sideways a little bit and find something that is joyful or meaningful to us. And I started working with a couple of friends who were curating the Adobe Books backroom gallery because I just needed something that I was happy with in my life. So even though I was working a ton, I did that as well. And I just found it really fulfilling to be working with artists and putting together shows. And it was like a really open, wonderful time in San Francisco where rent was still pretty cheap and people could live in spaces and kind of be creative. And there was just an opportunity for people to kind of be gritty and inventive and flexible and nimble. So I kind of got lucky in a lot of ways because, you know, only when you look backwards do you know how things have changed. But at the time, I had no idea that that was kind of a special moment in San Francisco. So I started curating, and then my friends were like, you know, we're artists, we really don't want to do the curating. And I was always kind of good at managing details and spreadsheets and things like that, the stuff that most people are like, no thanks. And I was like, ooh, let me get in. So I enjoyed that, and it started getting a lot of press and a lot of coverage, in large part due to Matthew Higgs, who used to live in San Francisco. And that moved what I was doing from a project space into us being invited to art fairs. And I didn't know what art fairs were when that invitation came. It was a phone call saying, oh, do you want to come to Miami and do this project? We love what you do. And I was like, what's an art fair? Can we start there? So they explained it, and then I hung up, and then I called my mom and dad and asked to borrow $1,500, which is what the fees were to join, which now is hysterical because the booths are like, you know, $5,000, $20,000, $60,000 and upwards. And that was kind of the start of moving into a professional gallery world and seeing what that was. And I remember like the last day that I had been in the booth, I was there by myself, installed everything, stood there for hours every day talking to people. And like the very last day, I had a few hours before I had to catch my plane. And I was just like, I think this is what I want to do. Like, I didn't know this existed. And, you know, also cried because I was exhausted, but kind of went back and just had a whole different perspective on things. And again, like as things happen, I had a friend who was moving to LA and moving out of a commercial space. And I asked her if I could talk to her landlord. And she was like, oh, yeah, sure. And I was like, no, really. And so that was when I opened my space, and that was 2006. And we had artist studios in the back. We kept the overhead really low. I had interns who would work with me. And I still had a full-time job as well for a very long time. And that kind of got less and less, especially when I went to grad school. I sort of said to my boss, oh, I have to quit. And he was like, well, what if you go down to like 2 days a week in person and one more day? And so I had the gallery and grad school and a job. And, you know, it's just how life is. And then I had my daughter and finally decided to quit everything else and just have a gallery. So that's how I became actually a person who only owns a gallery and doesn't have other jobs. So I don't know. That's a long-winded explanation, but
Wow,
That's great.
amazing. You're a superwoman, Eleanor.
I, you know, just wanted to be happy, I think. Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and I'm
it's
just
great to hear you talk. Sorry, I just want to say it's great to hear you talk about juggling all those things, because many artists do that, or
Yeah.
anybody who's really passionate about something that's perhaps maybe not profitable in the beginning, and you always have to work at something else to support yourself. So it's really great to hear that, how hard you worked to get to where you are, and that it's now you've reached a place that you're really humming in, like where you want to be.
I think that makes me more able to kind of understand artists too, who are juggling so much and really have genuine empathy, because that is what most people are doing. You know, they have side careers or second jobs. And I know it can be frustrating, but I also feel like, you know, there's that old adage, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. Like, I think there's almost nothing
Yes,
true in art. So everyone thinks.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
well, so the next question was, what made you decide to open a gallery? I mean, you kind of talked about that a little bit, I guess, but was there anything more involved in that step from, say, Adobe Books to, renting that space from your friend, or yeah, like that?
Yeah, there is a really big difference. And I think that when I went to Miami, I sort of understood it in a concrete way. And the big difference is having ongoing relationships where you're working with artists over years. And, you are fostering their careers, and you're going through their ups and downs as well if you're a good gallerist, because it's not always up. And I think that's kind of a key part of it. And I realized that was kind of a rich and interesting part of it that I was interested in. And that project spaces are great, but it really is one project to one project to one project. And that's sort of fascinating and maybe intellectually broad, but it doesn't have the deep relationships. And I've found that to be really fulfilling over the years. So I think that's probably the major difference. And then also, you can earn a living doing it too. That's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
You can earn a living having the gallery?
Yeah, right. Like a project space, we would sell things for like $20 to $200 to $600. And frequently they were getting picked up by major galleries immediately after the shows at Adobe. And then the prices would go through the roof. And it was like, maybe I should be doing that, But I just didn't understand how it worked until I saw it. So,
Yeah, that's great. So once you had started, or when you were starting a gallery, what are some of the risks you had to surmount in opening the gallery, both practically and personally?
Well, I have really tried to minimize risk with the gallery and keep my overhead really low. Maybe to my detriment, actually, to be honest, because I think I could have quit my day job years and years and years prior. Because as soon as I only was doing the gallery, it was pretty immediately obvious it was just going to work. And I didn't really trust that. I kind of thought maybe it wouldn't. So I wouldn't say I've had a ton of risk. I've been more kind of risk averse, but I've always felt like if you can keep your doors open and cover your overhead without too much grief, that's better for everyone. And then I also got really lucky, and Minnesota Street Project opened up. And so we are subsidized. We're not paying really truly full market rate for the gallery space here, which means that we don't have to worry in the same way as people downtown did who were evicted, or, with landlords who wanted to triple the cost of the rent and have tech companies move in. So that, I say lucky, but it's really not luck. It was sort of knowing that was a worthwhile shift to make from my low rent that I had in the Mission to coming here to keeping it kind of low and manageable. And I actually still have the lease on the old space and have it sublet to another gallery.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. So the Minnesota Soda Street complex, I'm sure many of our viewers who are from elsewhere know nothing about it, but it's been a godsend for the San Francisco art world. You want to talk just a little bit about
Yeah,
what that's about?
absolutely. So Deborah and Andy Rappaport are the founders of the project, and they have come from a venture capital background where they obviously are quite wealthy, and also incredibly passionate about the art world, which is wonderful, and passionate about it in San Francisco in terms of locally supporting it. So what they did was they initially were going to come up with a way to get a building in San Francisco that they could rent out at a low rate and keep stable so that multiple galleries could be in one building. And that was sort of the first prong of how to do it. But because Andy especially is such a good business person, he figured out how to kind of do it as this sort of huge idea. And so what they also have is an art handling service, which is up the street. And that's kind of the income arm of the space. And then the space we're in with the galleries has a large atrium space. And that has also had earned income from events and speaker series and performances as well. Obviously with COVID, we've had a year off on that. But they've done that. And then there are also artist studios across the street. I think there are about 30 spaces there, which are amazingly beautiful, bright spaces. And they have a computer workroom contributed by Adobe, the software company. And then they also have a dark room. They have a ceramics room. They have a large exhibition space where artists can put up exhibitions and kind of test them out. It's a pretty utopian dream. It's incredible. So we kind of all work together, and there's a lot of interplay between everyone, which is really great.
Where was
Yeah,
your
it's
gallery?
really wonderful. And it's also, what'd you say, Vic?
Where was your gallery in the Mission? I don't recall.
25th in Alabama, sort of outer Mission. And at the time, there were a couple of other galleries out that way. So there were about 3 of us that were closer to one another. But I think at this point, everyone except my old space is gone. So Equinum is there, which is a really great photo gallery run by Monique Deschaines. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So obviously there's a very different amount of foot traffic in Minnesota Street compared to being a sort of satellite area. So I'm sure that's a big help to everybody who's there in that big space with shared galleries. There's like 13 spaces in there, right? Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
It's great in terms of sales because you do get in walk-in sales, which really didn't ever happen at the old space. But it's also really great in terms of colleagues. I mean, walking down the hall and having a chat with whoever is great on a personal level. It's great if you're trying to find out whether a venue is a good one and whether it's worth using. It's great if you're trying to figure out shipping, things like that. I mean, it's really been amazing. Can't say enough about it. That's great.
So from your perspective, what is a gallerist workday usually like in non-pandemic times?
Probably a lot like it was today, which was coming into the gallery and having kind of admin work that you need to do and getting about a quarter of it done while people come in and chat. And sometimes those people come in and chat and buy things, and that's great. A couple of people who came by were graduate students that I had done a graduate class with. So they were just curious about artists and artwork and kind of wanted to talk about that. Yeah, it's very varied. I mean, a lot of it's education if you're in a generous mood and have time. I guess there's a lot of kind of registrar work where you're sort of keeping track of inventory, making sure things are going to the right places. We sold a painting today to a woman who's based in Reno, and that was talking to her on the phone about it and then getting the artist to make a video about the piece and sending it to her. Working out shipping details, things like that. I mean, it's a lot of nuts and bolts. And then like when you're having fun, you get to have the big ideas and kind of think about shows and plan those. But yeah, it's a broad bunch of things. It's a lot of image management, website updates.
Do you have your own website since you have that background?
I do my own website, yeah, but luckily what I use now is this software called ArtLogic, which sort of generates the website from the inventory database, so it really streamlines it. And that's something I've been wanting to do for years, and we finally kind of got up and running about 1.5 years ago. But yeah, they were usually 2 separate databases, so there's usually a lot of that kind of putting data into one thing and then having to pull it all over to the other one. But now it all goes into one place, which is great.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So following up on the last question, what was your day-to-day experience in being a gallerist? How did it change over the past year since the pandemic disrupted everything? I know you guys are back in your gallery spaces now, but when you weren't, how did that affect what you're doing?
You know, I was going to say luck, but I don't know. I got to come up with a better word than luck. But we had a show that was scheduled to open, I think, in April with Carissa Potter, who is a really amazing, sensitive artist. And she has an Instagram feed called People I've Loved. And she had been planning to do a show in the gallery with Sumi paintings that would be framed, and then sculptures and paintings on the wall. And she was pregnant as she was making a lot of the work for the show, and then had her daughter, and COVID had happened. We were in lockdown. Her daughter was born with cystic fibrosis. So she had a very high risk tiny infant, and there was just no way that we were going to do it in person at all. So, you know, I was perfectly happy to just cancel the show or, you know, install it myself for her or whatever. But she's a really creative, ambitious person, which even when faced with having an infant that was really sick, that was having issues eating and getting nutrition and feeding tube and all of that, she was still like thinking about her show and trying to come up with an interesting way to do it. And she said, would you be happy to do a virtual show? I said, yeah, of course, let's try that. And we had SketchUp files of the gallery, which for anyone that doesn't know is basically a 3D model of a space. And it can be a very professional version, but it can also be kind of a more layperson 3D way to make a space or a layout. One of the upsides of my background with so much technology is that I've kind of constantly kept data like that. Like when we first moved into the building, I had all the CAD drawings from the architects. And then we've had a few shows with artists who want to do 3D models. So we've had a SketchUp model and kind of added detail to it over the years. So when she said she wanted to do a virtual show, I said, yeah, well, we actually have a model. So then she took the model and started populating it and then said, you know, Josh, who's her husband, who works at, I think, Fallon Sinsinski Johnson. I can never quite get it right. He's an architect. He saw it and was interested in what she was doing, and he took it to his boss and said, hey, my wife is doing this rendering of her show in an architectural space. Could we take it over? And their company got really interested in the idea. And they're the company that like designed the first iconic Apple stores. And what they said was like, can we take over and create the model? And of course we said, yes, please. So they made this elaborate model that had all of the trusses, all of the lighting grid, the skylights, the pipes, everything, and gave it to Carissa. And she populated all of it with her drawings and just made this elaborate and beautiful installation that's actually viewable in virtual reality goggles, or this little thing called Google Cardboard, which you can slot your phone into and actually view it in 3D, or you can view it on a computer as well. So we did that, and I think, you know, that was received really well. It sold really well, and it was a really, really creative, fresh solution to being in the position we were in. And I was really thrilled with it. It was great. And then I did a lot of videos as well on Instagram, and contacted clients, and, you know, just would send videos to people about whatever piece they were interested in. And for me, it didn't feel that difficult to kind of just transfer over to that pretty quickly. So I think that's been a huge benefit for us. And then sort of transitioning back, you know, obviously you take whatever tools we've all learned to use, and we'll see how it integrates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just as an aside, it's like so great to be able to visit so many talks by artists and galleries and museums put on from, you know, all over the place now that everybody's using Zoom or whatever to present these things. It's opened up a whole world of opportunity, plus online shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hopefully some of that will stick around afterwards.
I think it will. I mean, I think the value is kind of, it's so great. I mean, I could have been in Santa Cruz, but I'm not, and that's okay.
So given these circumstances, what are your perceptions of how artists, galleries, and the art world in general have been dealing with the issues of the past year, and specifically, I mean, I guess you addressed that a little bit, but the effects of being restricted by the shelter-in-place limitations.
What was the first part of the question? I guess I could go back into our.
What are your perceptions, your thoughts of how artists, galleries, and the art world in general have been dealing, with these restrictions and changes over the last year?
Right. Well, I think there's been a lot of pushes, I mean, to what Beverly was saying, to doing things remotely and not in person. And a lot of those were effective. But what I'm also seeing is many different businesses popping up that are sort of offering to do virtual shows for you, or to sort of do sales online or connect you with clients online. And I think it's a little bit hard to figure out what's noise and what's useful with that. And I'm still not sure I know the answer. Because there are virtual art fairs, but it just doesn't seem like that would work, but maybe I'm completely wrong, and that's where we're going to go. But it seems like the sort of like touch and feel of things, and just the kind of excitement of being around a group of people at the same time is partly what drives those sales, and kind of the exuberance of it all. So I think we're just going to have to see. I mean, I haven't done a virtual show except for Carissa's, because I thought it was so uniquely well suited for actually doing it well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right. So have you heard anything? I mean, Carissa was obviously able to jump in and adapt really thoroughly to this new space or different space. But have you talked to other, I mean, your artists or artists in other galleries? I know from talking to artists, it's some people have no motivation. Some people are diving in and making work. So what have you heard from artists that you work with, maybe in particular, about how they dealt with it? And I know that people have gone through different phases.
Right.
A lot of us, I think, we're on the spotlight in the beginning. It's like headlights. It's like, what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
But we've all adapted in a certain way. But what has been your experience with your artists?
Yeah, some people really have taken a break just emotionally for whatever reason. And I have a lot of artists who are parents, where that makes life really much more convoluted in terms of how you have childcare, or if you've had remote learning for a long time. Tiffany Turner is an artist who is probably a good example that I work with, and she does really large scale paper sculptures of flowers. She's had 2 kids out of school for over a year now, and her studio is in her house and kind of always has been. And I think her productivity has been okay, but I would say her stress level and anxiety is not okay. Like it's too much, it's too hard. So, I mean, with those situations, you just, take a break, and it's okay. And the schedules will just get shuffled around, and that's fine. And then some people, like Paul Wackers, is a single guy who has a dog and can go wherever he wants, and can like go to a cabin in upstate New York and just be super productive. It really depends on your situation. And then we've got, I've got other people like Kira Dominguez Holgren, who's an incredible weaver, who's moved to Chicago through this because her husband's funding for his economics research at Berkeley was cut. And so he got a job in Chicago, which is great. But they've moved. They still have 2 kids out of school, but their kids are a little older, and her approach is a little different. And she's been super productive, and she's teaching in Chicago now. So it really varies person to person. There isn't really one answer, Yeah, but a lot of people have moved. That's changed. And there was a lot of anxiety with a lot of artists I work with about, like, are we still going to work together if I move? And I was like, yeah, we'll just ship the work. It's fine. Like, it doesn't matter to me where you're based.
Okay, sorry, I think I had a little internet glitch there. Am I okay?
Yeah, you're sort of frozen, I think, but we can hear you.
Oh, great. Okay, well, all I need to do is ask you a question then.
Great.
Did you finish with that last one? I had a little
I think so.
pause. Okay. What is your perception of the role of art in society, culturally, economically, socially, etc., whatever you want to talk about? And do you feel that there have been any shifts in these roles, or shifts in the actions of visual artists or art institutions because of the very dramatic events that have happened over the past year or so?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think art, it's very easy to put art aside as a sort of non-essential part of our life, right? We don't need it to eat. We don't need it to be housed. We don't need it to, for a lot of things, really. But I think art is an indicator of a moment where we've reached enough safety and enough food and enough shelter where we can actually do something more creative, right? It's like, when is there space for a mind to think in a larger way? It's only once our basic needs are met. I mean, and there are always these weird outliers of people who make amazing art, even though they don't have those things. But for the most part, art is kind of the expression of our society functioning well. So I would say that even though we've been in a pandemic and been on lockdown, I mean, I think people have been really creative. So I think we still are managing to kind of meet a lot of basic needs, even though maybe we're not in touch with people as much as we want to be. But yeah, I don't know. I do think art is a really interesting thing because it is so non-essential, but it is also this incredible drive that every single child that is neurologically developing normally actually does, right? It's one of those things like, is a child drawing? Are they figuring out to put 5 fingers on a hand? Are they figuring out, that there are 2 limbs? And you can tell a lot about a human development that way. And it's kind of incredible that it's universal across cultures and going back 70,000 years for our first handprints on walls. So yeah, I think of it as I don't think of it as non-essential. I think of it as like this incredible drive that we have. So yeah, I think when we're going through difficult times, I think that way of thinking, which artists generally have, which is more creative and can kind of coalesce ideas and experiences in a way that is more nuanced than maybe a lot of people that have a sort of facility of thinking that way with sort of more conceptual ideas, they can really kind of come up with ways of coping. And I feel like looking through all of the work submitted was kind of beautiful to see all of these different strategies of coping or understanding or thinking about the kind of difficulties that we've all faced. And, in very different ways. I mean, there's sort of named themes that emerged in all the work submitted, which were, Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, the murder and race in America. That was a really key kind of thread that came through, and obviously coronavirus as well. And then the environment as well, fires in California, and then children in isolation was another major theme. Yeah, so just seeing people process that, I think it's really interesting, and I think kind of brings society a way to look at things and talk about things that maybe people who are less creative can't do very easily.
Yeah, and I think that artists are very good at processing things that happen in the world, especially dramatic events, in a way that gives, I don't know, almost like a feedback or a place to feel like someone else understands you or understands what you're going through. I had a really powerful experience when I was laying out the show, so to speak, in the online gallery and arranging the artworks. And I did it sort of in a timeline within themes, in a sense, like starting out with sort of that craziness in the beginning and not knowing what was going on, and then moving through different ups and downs with the pandemic situation. And after I sort of put all the timeline together, I just went through everything, and the statements hadn't been entered in yet. So it was just images, image. And I had such an emotional experience going through that and remembering those phases in and out of those ups and downs, and the weirdness and the fear and the hope and all the craziness going on besides the pandemic. And I was like almost in tears looking through everything in that sort of isolation of just the images without any other information. It really was so powerful.
Yeah, I had the same response a few times going through it.
Along those lines, I've been putting the Instagram posts together, and my part of putting the show together was more mechanical than Beverly's, so I'm getting familiar with the work now, and so it's a real pleasure to get to read everyone's statements. And everyone's statements are so genuine, and I just hear their voices and can kind of touch into their experience, and it's certainly a treat of my job. So thank you to everyone for sharing your statements. Did you want to add anything more about Beverly's question in terms of the role of art in society?
Well, I think Beverly said it well. I mean, it's just like a way of processing that artists can offer the public at large. I mean, yeah,
I really liked what you said about a child, like watching the neurological development. I mean,
Mhm.
it's sort of like that's a metaphor for what we're doing on a older, larger scale,
Mhm.
you know.
right. Yeah, it is. Well, I mean, I think it is literally neurologically thinking through and linking ideas, right? The sort of the actual process of making art is process. I mean, it's, or like you call it a practice. It's sort of, I don't know, I think that's like neurological runnels, right? Like sort of practicing
Mhm.
the ideas to make them.
I just want to add one thing in terms of art institutions and what they have provided through all of this, both as reaction to what's been going on, but also because of the opportunity to offer more public forums from wherever they are on a national or international level to everybody, that the programming has really stepped up in terms of what a lot of institutions are, everything from galleries to museums or other cultural institutions, as far as presenting forums or talks or conversations or presentations about what everybody's been going through, but whether it's political or, you know, the pandemic or whatever it is that's been going on. So that's been really like addressing a lot of the socioeconomic issues and, the equity issues and all of that. And that's been really, it's too much to even take in. There's so much of it, but it's just a wonderful way to activate art in a real sense to um, promote change and promote, thinking about what the issues are and offering a lot of different perspectives on it. So that's what I've been seeing in terms of how institutions have been changing their offerings during this last year. And I think part of it probably has to do with we've all had so much time to really be more introspective this year and to really have the emotional space because we're not running around as much as normal to mothers. I'm sorry, maybe not. That's
I
news.
know, I was thinking like those people with children at home.
saying as someone who doesn't have any children in the house, so forgive me for that rude comment. But anyway, what was my point? Now I'm lost.
Introspection.
Oh, so yeah, so it's a chance to reflect more, I think, and to look at other people's situations in a way that normally maybe we don't. Like to be more aware and to be more cognizant and to be more empathetic to other people's situations, because we're going through such stuff and we're all going through a lot of shared things. So I think that empathy might be enhanced through all of this. One would hope.
So we were going to ask you to talk about some of the work that you selected for the exhibition, and why some of the particular works or themes resonated with you. Do you want to, should I start? I can start screen sharing. Do you want to start with the winners?
Yeah, sure, we'll do that. And feel free to kind of scroll through after those too, because yeah, seeing them again, right? Definitely.
Before we start this, I just want to say, please start putting questions in the chat if you want to ask any questions, because we'll soon be getting to that point.
So this is a piece, and we are not sure if it's Shauna or Sienna. I think it's Shauna Smith, so apologies. I did see you in our listener, what is it? Like our participant list. I think that's what it's called. So this piece really struck me because it brought together two major themes. We've got this little girl who's standing with a backpack on, which kind of makes me think that she's either going to school or would have been going to school. And we all know that most kids have not been in school during this pandemic. She's also got this background, which is orange, which reminded me, and I think is on purpose, of that day, September 8th, that most of us experienced, where the sun really didn't come out in California because wildfire smoke was so intense. And I think seeing kind of those images together, and then the desolation of this building, which, that actually, for whatever reason, is kind of neither here nor there for me. That's just a kid kind of out exploring, and maybe it's just an interesting place to go. But just seeing a kid kind of looking down, there's no one around her. She looks innocent, sort of curious, but kind of inward. Her body language is inward. And then you've just got this kind of insane sky behind her. I just thought it was really powerful. And I think those experiences that day, September 8th, that sky, I don't think any of us that actually saw it will ever forget it. So seeing it again really struck me. And just seeing all the children. I mean, there were a lot of submissions with isolated children, and some stronger than others. But I think the theme of how difficult it's been for children to not be in the society of their peers, basically, is pretty profound. And I think we're going to probably be hearing about it for a long time for kids who've been in public schools, for example, been out for over a year at this point in San Francisco. I just can't see how that's not going to be detrimental to some extent. I saw it just in my niece, who she's 15. She'd hate it if she heard me talking about it, but she's just gotten quieter and quieter and quieter over the last year, to the point where she's kind of withdrawn at this point, and she just had her first hour back at school finally. And then I think another hour, because they're phasing them in. And my mom said that she was already talking more. So it's just, it's intense. It's hard. I mean, and most of us are, a lot of us, it looks like on the feed, we're all old enough to know that things kind of come and go. But I think at 10, 15 or 5, you don't know that things are going to change or come back. So anyway, I think that's why this painting in particular really touched me, sort of that age, the sort of fragility of that age and the complexity of the situation.
So yeah, that was the first prize winner. And then the second prize was Katie Drury Anderson, near the bottom here. Forgive my quick scrolling.
Right. I don't know if I can look at this one and keep it together. Yeah, this is just so simple. So simple, so sad, and just having his own words say what a lot of different artists tried to sort of approach this topic. But I think the simplest thing of just using his own last words is the most profound way to put it. And then obviously the flag is, it's so clear. It's like, this is part of America. This is part of our legacy and part of our history, and we have not figured it out, and we're not okay. So yeah, I can't look at it and cry. But it's hard.
Yeah, it is powerful.
Yeah, it's profound.
And then Sue's Wolf.
Yeah, and this is a lot simpler to look at, less difficult. But this one I chose just because I just think is absolutely beautifully done. And I think this series comes from Burned Out Trees, and all of this addition of color that she's added in is creative and beautiful, and kind of finding beauty within the desolation and damage. I thought was quite touching, and kind of hopefully what we will all find in a sort of larger metaphorical sense. And a lot of people were trying to talk about environment in various works that were submitted, and I think this kind of, it does it interestingly in a very beautiful piece of art, but also gets the message across as well. Yeah, just all of those pictures, really beautiful.
And then you wanted to talk about one other one, is that right?
Yeah, the cataloging pieces that were embroidered. And I don't know the artist's name, because when I looked at everything, the names were not.
Susan Doyle.
Thank you.
Yeah, she actually know her.
Just by way of explanation, Eleanor could not see the names when she was jurying, so she's not as familiar with the artist's name.
Right.
Oh, right.
Right. So I just thought this was lovely. And I think one thing that I'm really drawn to is kind of conceptual work that has this kind of ordered way of conceiving of data in one way or another. And I thought this was just lovely and funny and kind of lighthearted, where she's got April 2020 and it's all her weight gain, which is just a tiny bit under there with and I just think it's funny. So many people were baking. I think we all saw everybody with their sourdough starters and running out of flour, and this is kind of the charming, funny part of COVID, with everyone just being at home and being in their kitchens all the time.
I love the days of the week.
Oh, you know what? I didn't ever see that. It was too low res when I actually
Oh,
looked at
really?
them. That's great.
Oh
That's
my God,
awesome.
can you see it?
Yeah, awesome.
Could definitely relate to that.
Right, even better. Yeah, and then the one on the next side is the lettuce, which is really funny, the sort of weight loss section.
Yeah, and then here you can see so all the weight she gained over here, then she lost yet more in the month of May.
Yeah,
Eating only salads, yes.
very evenly salads. Anyway, I just thought this was really great because it kind of pointed to this very funny thing that everyone baking and cooking and just charming and intelligent and fun. So
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, and then we've got like this one with Susan Doyle as well. That sort of virus. Oh no, it's not. That's
Oh,
Meredith.
this one you mean?
Oh, those are great too. Yeah,
Yeah, this was Susan Doyle's also.
right. Freaking out, all the kind of words of feeling: discouraged, perplexed, agitated, fearful, jumpy, chocolate. It's like it's really great.
Yeah, it kind of says it all.
It does.
Um,
Okay, well, it's
there's
now time for questions. Okay, do you want to say something more, Eleanor?
Oh, I was going to say one thing. There were a lot of submissions of Trump with paintings of Trump in one way or another, and I just didn't want to include him. So to any artists that submitted those, they may have been really great works, but I also thought we needed a palette cleanser. So there's only one where he's masked in the show because I just didn't want to include that, and that's obviously my own personal feeling and not
Well,
necessarily artistic merit.
I'm right there with you because as when I was reviewing all of the images, I felt very traumatized, and I realized how relieved I am to not have to look at him all the time and listen to him all the time.
Absolutely.
Uh, but I'll pull up that piece here eventually here.
Yeah, that one. The lone danger.
There we
Yeah,
go.
with him and his.
he's not too recognizable in this one.
That's
Yeah.
probably why I was like, okay, fine.
Do you want to say anything more about the process of jurying or what that was like for you? I mean, I've done jurying myself, and I know there were nearly 600 almost images to look at, and it was a lot to sort through. And so, you want to say anything about the process that you went through at all?
Um, hmm. I mean, I feel like it was pretty quick, pretty immediate responses to a lot of work in many ways. There's this sort of gut response of liking something, not liking it, and then sort of thinking about how it related. And then I think when I sort of started thinking about the themes or sort of seeing it as a whole, then it became about picking the pieces that within those themes felt like the best way of talking about it or showing it. So yeah, there's probably like a sort of first gut response and then kind of thinking about it more concretely in groupings, which it sounds like you did too when you were putting together the catalog.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly. Because there was more than, obviously way more than we can include in a single show. And we, one of the ideas behind the show was to have a lot of varied perspectives. And so it does become a matter of like, you can't have too many on the same theme and this particular theme or whatever. So I do thank you for really providing a wide scope of perspectives from what you chose.
I tried to deliver what you asked for.
Thank you for doing that. And we're having a beautiful response to the show, and people are really touched by it. So thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And
It's
thanks
been
all-
really fun on Instagram seeing artists posting it too, their own pieces being included and tagging me. It's great.
No, it really feels good because it's so hard to, as you know, to not have a gallery open and to have that personal interaction with your own, your normal viewing public or the artists who are in the show, where there's so much more time to talk about and interact with, people about the work. And so with what Victoria's been doing on social media, it's been really great to see that activity and people talking to each other about the work and being able to sort of put more focus on particular works each time she does a post. So,
Yeah, I've been enjoying how you've been pairing them, Victoria, too. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting pairing. Those two together.
yeah.
It's
So it's funny
mostly-
because, you know, you chose what you chose, and then I chose how to arrange them, and then Victoria's been choosing how to arrange them together in smaller groups.
Right.
And I love that. And that's one of the things I wanted to say about, you know, jurying or curating, is that we all have very different points of view. And that's one of the things that always comes up when it comes to, you know, whether or not you're getting into a juried show. It has so much to do with the particular juror's perspective, or, you know, what they visually like, but also what conceptually they're relating to.
Mhm.
So like, we would have certainly, all three of us, created a very different show from one another, right? And I think that's really interesting. And in a sense, it's like there's that perspective that the curator brings or the juror brings that creates, again, another layer of a statement.
I think that's something I didn't mention, is there are probably a lot more pieces of nature and solitude in nature and solace from nature than maybe another juror, because that is something that is personally really important and resonated for me looking through work. And I could see how that could be not that relevant for someone else. So
All right, well, let's open up some questions from the audience now, unless you have another question, Vicky. Okay.
No, there's already a couple that we
Okay,
can
great.
start with. So Marie Cameron, I believe, asked, do you see a disconnect between what artists are creating in this moment and what collectors are interested in?
That's not with my artists that I'm working with. Yeah, no, I mean, no, but you know, my sample size is really small. I can't answer that question really, really well.
Another question came from Michael McDowell, and these are both, so far, these are all artists in the show. What are your thoughts about viewing paintings in person versus viewing them digitally or in virtual form?
Well, I think a lot is lost. As someone who actually has an MFA in painting, I mean, I really do appreciate the hand and the gesture and the, you know, the fidelity of being in front of something in person and being able to see, you know, which way a brushstroke went and just those tiny details. I do care about that a lot. So it's a huge difference, but in many ways, we're all just doing the best we can. So.
Those are all the questions so far. Are there any other, if anyone has another question, feel free to write it into the chat. And there's a lot of gratitude also in the chat from the artists. And thank you for your kind words, everyone. It kind of just all coalesced. I mean, we're grateful to Eleanor for her selection as well.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at the chat. It's very nice to see all those wonderful comments.
I see. So talk a bit more about collectors. Well, there's how to find collectors, and there's how to keep relationships open with collectors. And then there's the kinds of collectors where I'm seeing a really interesting shift in Minnesota Street Project, especially before the pandemic, of much younger people starting to come in and collect art, whereas it really used to be people predominantly in their 60s who would buy art. I feel like when I first opened a gallery, sort of 50s, 60s, 70s even, and people who kind of had what they considered important collections and thought about it that way in a much more cerebral sense. And I think what I've noticed is a lot of younger people starting to feel permission to buy art. And I think feel permission is actually a really good way of putting it. Like there was a guy who came in today who was an engineer, tech company engineer, and he was probably about 27. And I could tell he was very interested in the art and probably would have wanted to buy some art, but I could tell he wasn't quite comfortable yet. And so that's fostering that comfort of people to sort of think about it as kind of a bigger picture, that they're supporting an artist, that they're also going to live with something in their home, that there's kind of a whole ecosystem you start engaging with as a collector. So I think that's educating ideally is kind of the next phase of kind of dealing with younger collectors and having them kind of move into a space where they have bought a home and are feeling settled and want to have things on their walls that they want to live with. I'm seeing much less of the very serious collector, which doesn't mean we're selling less, actually. It's just a slightly different approach.
I actually am happy to hear that. That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I am too. It's good. It's heartening. It's nice to feel like peers are buying things at this point. And I'm 45, so it's 45-year-olds and some 30-year-olds as well. 20s is harder. Few. I think people just don't quite trust themselves yet at that age, maybe aesthetically, especially if there's a reasonable price tag attached.
So another question was, how do you feel this pandemic work will stand the test of time?
That's an interesting question, and I was wondering that too, kind of looking at it. There were a lot of submissions that had to do with masks, and I feel like very few of those are going to feel relevant in much time, except maybe the ones that are the most interesting. I don't even know how to put it, like whatever it is, like the handmade mask, like the sort of special particular things where people try to express their own identity wearing a mask. I think that stuff is going to feel relevant. I think there was a painting with people all standing in a line, and I think it was for like the DMV or something pretty banal. I think that'll stand the test of time. I feel like that's like an experience that is so odd to be in public and have your face covered so frequently. And I've found, like, as a woman walking around in San Francisco, like I've usually kind of get bothered, and having a mask on, I never get bothered, and it's so interesting. And I'm like, oh, I kind of like this. Being sort of invisible. It's like just, I kind of understand something about, like, hijabs and that version of covering oneself, which I think I was probably at the sort of one end maybe judgmental, to the other end just ignorant. But I really understand it much more now and understand the upside. So I don't know. I think maybe that's an interesting experience that will stay relevant and interesting.
So Sienna Smith asked, does your gallery consider emerging artists' work? And what kind of qualities are you looking for in the artists that you represent? If there's anything, I mean, it might vary, right?
Yeah, it does vary. I think, I don't know how many artists work with emerging artists necessarily. I mean, galleries, but I certainly do. Although in terms of the economics of the gallery, there have to be a few emerging artists on the roster, and then more kind of mid-career to kind of keep the overhead covered. So you can have, like, one show a year that's a real maybe. Otherwise, because sometimes those shows don't sell at all, or it takes years to kind of generate a collector base for those artists. And then every once in a while you'll have a show like that and it just takes off right away, which is great. And then that kind of moves that artist over to the different arena, and then there's room again for an emerging artist. Because there just are practicalities of paying rent and paying artists and everything on time. And then what am I looking for? I would say that especially the older I get, a good working relationship is almost as important as the artwork. Like just a sane, clear communication without drama, really. I feel like every artist that sits down and we're talking about joining the gallery and being represented, I'm like, okay, one of the rules here is no drama. We just don't do that. Like, I've had enough bad boyfriends, It's like, I don't need that in my gallery life. I mean, girlfriends, boyfriends, it's not a boy-girl thing necessarily, but and there is a certain personality sometimes with artists I've worked with in the past that were really talented, but just that working relationship was too hard to embattled. So to me at this point in my life, that is as important to me, that we're sort of bringing a certain amount of professionalism to the table and meeting deadlines, and and I think in a lot of ways that's probably a good filter anyway. It's like for artists that meet deadlines are sort of taking it seriously and have a solid practice.
Yeah, makes sense. Another question from Laura Myers. Have you been able to get a feel if the audience for art has expanded past a usual gallery goer?
Over the course of the pandemic, or over, I'm not sure what that refers to.
Yeah. Or maybe just even in the past, I mean, maybe economically also over the past few years. I mean, we could consider that broadly.
I think Instagram is an interesting space for feeling like there's a broader audience, and I'm not totally sure how many of those people would ever actually set foot in the gallery. I mean, a certain amount, of course, but not a lot. I think that's kind of broadened our reach in a way that I didn't take very seriously until maybe the pandemic got going. And then thought, oh, this is a really interesting channel and a way to connect and a way to put content out there that is kind of easy to organize and easy to access later. Whereas Facebook is kind of messy. I don't know. It's like there's a lot of noise on there, whereas Instagram is really tidy and very easy to find things again.
Have people come into the gallery through Instagram?
I don't know. Probably. I'm not really sure. Oh, you know what? The 2 graduate students who I took rappelling as an exercise to get over fear in terms of art making. And that was Mike Orsega's idea. I got to give him credit. He's a professor at SF State. And I'm a rock climber. And so we took them rappelling, and then and I was like, oh, can I tag you on Instagram? And I tagged them, and they came in today. So I mean, but that's, who knows?
Well, I think that is everything.
All the questions. Well, I just want to thank, first of all of the artists for participating in this exhibition and offering us such a beautiful range of work on the theme. And I want to thank Eleanor for her fantastic job in jurying the show and adding her perspectives today. I think there's been a lot of great feedback in the chat about how much people are appreciating the show and then this conversation as well. So I want to really say you're welcome to everybody who's saying thank you. I really appreciate that. And I also want to thank everybody for attending today. Again, the show, this talk is being recorded, and we will put it on our website once we get the closed captioning done, which takes a little bit of time. So, and then again, we can put the links to the gallery and all of that. They're in the chat. They're at the top, I think, if you want to get those links to visiting the gallery if you haven't been there yet, or to our Instagram and Facebook as well.
May I say one quick thing about visiting? All of the galleries at Minnesota Street Project are pretty much open on Saturday. And for most of us, you really don't need an appointment at this point. And I would say any other day of the week, it's probably worth making an appointment, with one gallery, whoever you want to see. And then you can kind of walk around. And if people are open, just knock on the door and ask them. Most people are fine with people coming in. So,
yeah. And it's a nice big open space, and it's just lovely to visit. That's the only place my husband and I have been to in terms of going to galleries during this whole time. And it feels very safe. They're very good about it. So.
Yeah, there's a big new show in the atrium that just got installed, which is all artists from the studios across the street that Julie Casemore curated.
Mm-hmm.
Lots to
all
see.
Right. We hope to be up there soon. All right, well, I think that's it then. I really want to thank everybody. And it's great to see so many of the artists in the show here. I'd love to talk to all of you as well, but I run out of time. And we hope to see you again at another talk, or perhaps in another show.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was really moving, and I was really happy to do it, be part of it. So,
all right.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Let's maybe unmute, and everybody can do a little round of applause.
Oh, yeah.
Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Nice to see your faces.
You guys did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.